Hi, I'm Ariana, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. We're very excited about today's topic, sustainability in business. And as we wait for everyone to sign in, I thought that we could get to know our speakers a little bit more with an icebreaker question. So Adam, Marian, what does sustainability mean to you? Adam, let's start with you.
Hi, Ariana. So good to be with you, and thanks for having me here on this webinar. My name is Adam Gromis. I lead on sustainability policy for Uber. As it relates to what does sustainability mean for me in the context of business, to me, there's the technical answer and there's the aspirational answer. So on the technical side, to me, it means the ability for the business to do what it does in perpetuity, given the resource constraints of the planet and of human health, which are absolutely critical in order for businesses to keep doing what they do. But that's the technical answer. Aspirationally, I think what sustainability in the case of business means for me is first having a green flashlight to unveil new areas of opportunity for the business to invest and make money and add value. And second, to add a green safety net so the business can protect that value from an ever-changing world of new requirements, consumer expectations, regulations, and other items that crop up as sustainability, climate change, and other resource constraints become more and more present for businesses in the way they operate.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that's great, Adam. You could have taken exactly my talking points, because to me, sustainability means value, and protection of value and promotion of value. To your point on the safety net as well, as it's promotion and protection of value. So I've worked at this niche. So I'm the head of ESG here, and I've worked at this very niche version of sustainability, which is at the intersection of investors and environmental and social issues. So I always joke that when I come to work, for the last 17 years, I've done this for 17 years, I've made the same joke for 17 years, people are probably getting sick of it, but I make the joke that when I come to work, I stop caring about people in the environment. I take that hat off and I put on a new hat, which is to serve shareholder value. But the fact is that it's the same story. These aren't mutually exclusive objectives. They're not even similar. It's the exact same story. If you don't take care of the natural and human capital on which your business relies, in our case, employees, drivers, restaurants, cities, riders, etc., your business, our business, Uber's business will not be successful in the long term. And it's important to remember that the goals of prosperity for shareholders and prosperity for communities are not at odds with each other. It's the same thing: less polarization, greater diversity, healthy and thriving communities, and a sustainable world benefits everyone, companies and communities alike.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Great answers, both of you. And I'm excited to tap into your expertise further as we continue into our webinar. So quick housekeeping. Today we'll be hearing from our experts, Adam and Marian, who are experts in environmental, social, and governance, as well as public policy. We'll be discussing why sustainability is important in business, how Uber weaves sustainability into our business strategies, and best practices to create a strong sustainability strategy. We welcome questions, so if you have any questions throughout today's webinar, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We'll also allow time at the end of today's session to go through as many as we can. And if we don't get to your questions, our team will follow up with you via email. So again, introducing today's experts, we have Marian Macindoe, who is the head of ESG strategy and engagement at Uber. She engages with our investors on ESG issues and is responsible for producing Uber's ESG reports. Next is Adam Gromis, our senior manager of public policy here at Uber. Adam is Uber's global lead on sustainability policy. And I'm your moderator for today, Ariana Echevarria, and I'm a marketing manager here at Uber and moderating this discussion. So let's take a look at why sustainability is important in business. We know that climate change is here. Many of us have experienced the effects for ourselves. And here in California, we know that heat waves can be deadly. In fact, this photo came from Marian. Marian, could you tell us more context behind this photo?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a picture that my dad took at a winery in September of 2020 in Oregon. So those of you here in California, and I think Adam, you're here in California as well, may remember that in the fall of 2020, there were days that the sun didn't come out. And this situation was much the same in Oregon and all across the West Coast. And when you think about it, it's important. Not only were there devastating environmental impacts, but people's health and livelihood were also impacted. And the UN report that came out a few months ago, they forecasted that heat waves so extreme, they used to happen only once every 50 years, now happen almost 5 times more often. And just anecdotally, it's, there's a fire season now in California, and it's something that none of us look forward to as the summer heats up.
Yeah, absolutely true. So we know that climate is impacting our environment, but let's think about where sustainability impacts business. Adam, could you tell us more about this?
Yeah, happy to. There's a number of levers and places where you can really unlock value and identify areas where you have either opportunity or risk as it relates to sustainability. Generally speaking, for those who are in procurement or those who are in strategy or those who are in operations, you're looking at a couple different areas. So immediately, if you're a business whose employees move around the world a lot, travel is an area where you might have a large carbon footprint, and maybe an area of opportunity both to reduce your carbon footprint and potentially to save on costs. The second area could be who it is that you work with, who you procure items from. Often there's a lot of embedded carbon in your supply chain, you might say. But there's also an opportunity to look for best in practice suppliers and those who are providing highest efficiency service, production of goods or provision of services. And the last area, of course, is mostly on the consumer side, but also in terms of investors, shareholders, in terms of employees. That's to be looking at the global trends. Where is the world going? It's certainly not going to get any easier as it relates to climate. And the best companies in the world who will survive and stand out in this century will also be the ones who are tackling this century's greatest challenge, which is truly climate, COVID notwithstanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Adam. So we know that sustainability, like you said, can mention the way we work with business partners and global megatrends, both on the consumer and shareholder side. I would love to learn more about how sustainability drives value for our organizations. Could you both tell me more about this?
Yeah, I'm happy to start here. So it's difficult to, at least when you have sustainability in your title, or if you're looking around for reports and you put it in for corporate sustainability, you can stumble over a lot of studies out there. I'll mention a few to underline some of these points. But first, let's break down the areas where you might really tick the boxes in terms of evaluating where sustainability is going to hit either your balance sheet or your value looking forward. So we've broken it down into a couple areas here. So first, there's brand value. Second, there's the consumer side, both increasing consumer demand and defending the consumers that you already have. Third is reducing costs, usually through efficiency. Fourth is attracting and retaining talent, so engaging with your employees. And lastly, it's identification of new ways to invest in new areas of opportunity to push into either new products, new services, et cetera. So let's take each one of these, and Marian, I'm hoping you'll help me out here. But for instance, looking at the brand value side, in a recent study, 63% of Americans said that they want corporations to drive social and environmental change in the absence of government action. This is becoming increasingly an expectation of consumers, if not something more where they'll show higher willingness to pay. That leads us, of course, to the next item, which is meeting consumer demands. 83% of consumers think companies should be active in shaping ESG best practices. And this is not with that particular figure, but more and more we see consumer groups who are interested and willing to pay more for green products and services.
And Adam, just to build on that, the B2B aspect too.
Right.
Yeah, I think
exactly.
91% of companies. So if your clients are, in addition to retail consumers, but also B2B customers, 91% of companies now consider ESG in purchasing decisions.
Exactly. So yeah, especially when you think about the largest brands in the world, many of them, like ours, like Uber, have made massive sustainability commitments, climate commitments. So as you're thinking of how to sell to those large corporate customers or large government customers who you may have, look at their commitments to figure out what are the types of products and services that they'll expect to be purchasing, and what are the types of companies that they'll be expect to be engaging with, because more and more of those large entities will be hoping for peers in this process. In terms of cost reduction, as I mentioned before, this is largely an efficiency game where you're looking to cut electricity costs, cut the cost of inputs, cut the cost of fuel purchasing, et cetera. According to a recent McKinsey study, a sustainability strategy can reduce costs substantially and can affect operating profits by as much as 60%, largely through lowering energy consumption and water intake costs. So there's a number of areas to look for where your inputs, where your costs are sensitive to certain inputs, particularly on the energy and water side in that case. Employee retention is becoming more and more a topic. Many of you may recall just 2 years ago around Climate Week, just before then, there was a large protest by Amazon employees to say, we really expect our company to be doing more. And Amazon has made a lot of changes since then, which are really admirable and are the respect of many companies around the world. And so employee action is a real thing. Employee talent and retention are a real thing. And another recent survey, another statistic for you, 86% of employees prefer to support or work for companies that care about the same issues as they do, sustainability being one of several. Marian looks over a number of issues at Uber, not just environment, so certainly social issues, diversity, inclusion, ethical practices, et cetera. But sustainability more and more is topping the list for a number of employees, not just because that's what they want to associate themselves with, but that's what they want to spend their time on. They want to be involved with brands and working on products and services that matter over time. The last piece on this list, I don't have a specific statistic for you, but in terms of creating new opportunities, this is a real area of challenging your employees to look for areas of investment, to say, look, we want to reach zero waste, we want to reach zero emission, we want to reach a number of sustainability commitments, and those constraints provide challenges that can unlock new opportunities, new innovations, new ways to partner with outside talented organizations and groups for you to build new things that you may not have considered before. And so the list is long, and we'll get into some of those examples later in the presentation in terms of what sustainability has led us to innovate on here at Uber.
Yeah, that was an excellent overview, Adam. Thank you so much. So just as we think about how our stakeholders are consumers, like you said, we also have the other side of the spectrum, which are investors. So Marian, looking at you here, could you tell us more about how investors assess sustainability in business practices?
Yeah, absolutely. So number one, investors care about climate change. Number two, investors care more and more about climate change every year. So as I said, I've been working at this intersection of investors and ESG issues for 17 years. And currently, as of now, about half of global assets under management are committed to net zero. And these are the biggest investors around: BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, et cetera. So what net zero means in this context is that these asset managers are going to be working in concert with asset owners to align their investment portfolios to net zero by 2050, with having a variety of bespoke interim targets along the way. They're going to change the way they invest. They're going to engage with companies. They're going to escalate their voting policies at annual meetings to support these goals of their portfolio being net zero and to help the world transition to a lower carbon economy. And we saw this loud and clear in the 2021 annual meeting season, which is typically in the spring in the United States every year, when an activist investor successfully waged a battle to install 3 directors on the board of ExxonMobil, with the goal of pushing Exxon to reduce its carbon footprint. Investors are going to use engagements and shareholder proposals and proxy fights to press for lower emissions, more reporting, better reporting, more decision useful reporting, and are going to be ratcheting up their expectations over the years of portfolio companies until their investments are net zero. This translates into real world reductions in greenhouse gas emissions using their investments and investment products as levers for change. So I just said that investors care about this. But what I didn't go into is why investors care about this. And in your mind, maybe you're thinking, don't investors only care about making money? Like, why do they care about climate change? And the answer is yes, they care about making money. And yes, this is part of it. I mean, first of all, there's just 3 points to this. First, climate change is real and caused by humans. You can see it out your window. You saw it in the picture earlier. And we can't sit idly by and watch the real life human health and environmental impacts and not take action. And these impacts have a cost to them. In that picture, which from earlier, you may have seen in the foreground, there's tubs of grapes there, which is part of the winery's vintage for that year. And a lot of that vintage was lost in California and Oregon because of smoke taint. And that's one tiny anecdotal example, but it's estimated there's $23 trillion in reduced annual global economic output worldwide as a result of climate change. So it matters to the system. Second of all, as Ariana mentioned, clients, customers, consumers, as Adam said, consumers care about this. Millennials and Gen Zs make decisions about where to work, where to buy, who to invest with based on their values in ways that other generations have not. And third, and most importantly, investors don't want to be the ones left holding the bag as the world experiences physical impacts of climate change and as society transitions to a lower carbon economy. So let's put the direct impacts aside for a second, the physical ones, acute and chronic weather changes and the impacts that come along with that. Put a pin in that. That's going to shape the entire future of our society. Put a pin in it, put that completely aside. Almost the entire financial system we have is built on the backs of fossil fuels, and fossil fuels are embedded in supply chains and in products and operations in almost every single product and service that you see or that you use. And we have to get away from this. So when governments and regulators and companies and people start, and I say start, but we're already well into it, transitioning away from fossil fuels, investors want to make sure that you, when they ask you as a company, are you ready for climate change? Are you thinking about climate change? What they're really saying is, tell me that you have a plan for a future in this changing world, whatever it's going to look like. There's a lot of uncertainty about the nature of change and the timing of change and the magnitude, but they want to know that you're thinking about it so that you can plan ahead for a future where you can be resilient and successful. And so can they, as your investors.
That's great, Marian. What I'm hearing from you both, Adam and Marian, consumers want a plan, investors want a plan, employees who come to work for your company want a plan about your sustainability strategies. So why don't we give an example of the way that Uber has woven sustainability into our business strategies? Adam, I'd love if you could kick us off here.
Sure. So last year, as we were kind of evaluating the set of opportunities and risks in front of our company, in the really big picture, if we think about being a relevant brand in mobility for this century, and we think we've earned some credit of certainly being disruptive in the space of transportation and mobility. And as we think of going forward and being a positive disruptor in mobility around the world, we looked at the overwhelming threat to the world as it stands for this century, and that's climate change. The global pandemic of COVID has just been a dress rehearsal for what collective action needs to look like as it relates to climate change. So as we said, what can we do to help here? We're an organization that enables moving people and goods from A to B around the world. We have to be a part of the right side of history as it relates to climate change and be an enabler of zero emission mobility around the world for people and things alike. And so here's where we started last September with this announcement that by 2030, we would enable 100% of rides on Uber in all electric vehicles, on micromobility or public transportation in the US, Canada, and Europe, and everywhere globally by 2040 outside of those markets. So over the next 2 decades, we'll make a truly zero emission platform for mobility that we can enable on Uber. And that for us just became almost a simple calculus for the direction that we have to go in. If we're both going to remain relevant to our consumers, but the technology that we need to build to manage both the risks and the opportunities in front of us in an ever-changing world where it is becoming more and more costly to move people and things from A to B. So how are we going to get there? On the next slide, just Four key areas where we're maintaining a focus. The first is how can we build products and services for our end consumers, namely riders, eaters, others who come to the app looking to go from A to B or move something from A to B. We need to build low or no emission mobility products for those users. So we've launched Uber Green, for instance, in more than 100 markets around the world, serving thousands of towns and cities with low or no emission products on demand mobility. The second category is helping drivers and delivery partners on Uber make the shift to zero emission vehicles over time. This is a massive challenge. Drivers everywhere overwhelmingly face financial barriers to switching from the car that they use today to switching to a lower emission form of vehicle tomorrow, or ultimately a battery electric vehicle over the long term. And we want to help with those financial barriers. We've committed over 800 million in total resources to assist hundreds of thousands of drivers in the US, Canada, and Europe make the shift over the next 5 years out to 2025. And we've made those resources available in a number of ways, including direct incentives available from Uber, savings through our partner companies, and I'll share a bit on who those are in the next slide, and other ways that drivers can earn more and save more by making the shift to EVs. The third category, of course, is that this can't just be a transformation about cars. Cars clog cities, and even if we move them all to electric, it will still be a lot of quiet traffic. So importantly, we need to be mindful of multimodal options for our users who don't just want to go from A to B or get a meal from A to B on 4 wheels. They want to go on 2 wheels. They want to go on 3 wheels. They want to go on 18 wheels or 100 wheels on a train. And so we're being mindful of that. We've been expanding the number of locations by which you can order an Uber or connect with, say, micromobility like electric mopeds, electric scooters, electric bikes, that you can connect with transit systems and book it right in your Uber app.
And Adam, lest we forget that we also launched walking deliveries available in several 20 dozens of cities in Japan, and also available in Canada, Mexico, and Brazil. And the walking is a zero emissions as well.
We did indeed. In fact, last night it was a rare rainy night in San Francisco, and my wife and I were very hungry, and I went out to pick it up a few blocks away, so I didn't want to have to bother a delivery partner, but also it was expensive to get it delivered at that hour. So I found it much easier myself just to get out and for a nice walk in the rain, pick up food with the family. So indeed, there are a number of ways that you can take non-car trips on Uber, and over time we will look for ways to expand those options, because it will be so important that our platform is congruent with where urban planning and the future of cities needs to go to make the movement of people and goods a sustainable endeavor out through the middle of this century. The last piece is that we can't just do this by saying, hey, we're going to get to zero in about a decade, just trust us. We recognize that we owe our shareholders, we owe our customers, we owe our employees and other stakeholders transparency. And we need to be held accountable to both of these claims and where we are today, where we need to go tomorrow. So we've made a commitment to be transparent. Marian helped produce our first ever ESG report last year. We did our second this year already for investors. And I did a climate assessment and performance report that we made available last year, showing for the first time ever emissions from trips on Uber in the US and Canada, and the number of electric vehicles that are serving those trips. We're one of the first companies in the world in general to record the emissions that result from each customer transaction and the use of our products and services. We hope it's a direction that more and more companies are headed in. We hope it gives more investors, employees, customers confidence in where we're headed as a company and what we need to do tomorrow to get to our zero emission goals and aspirations. Those are the actions that we're taking. So most importantly, and for many of you who are working at even very large companies working on either sustainability commitments or just getting started, one of the things that we've realized is we can't do any of this by ourselves. And it's a challenging and humbling thing to be mindful of, but these are unprecedented challenges and they need unprecedented solutions. And so we need to be playing with others in the sandbox. As our CEO, Dara, likes to say, climate is a team sport. So over the last year since we made this announcement, we've been reaching out to a number of companies, big and small, that are developing the leading solutions, in this case, in the electric vehicle space. Over time, we'll be looking at other areas to reach our very ambitious commitments. But you see a number of partners listed here to help our drivers, for instance, shift to electric vehicles and use electric vehicle charging infrastructure in easier ways. We've created a portfolio of these partnerships because our partners in various markets need different types of solutions, and no one has the single solution to get there. So the last category of names mentioned here are those in the policy space and in the advocacy space. And so it's been very important for us to reach out, engage with a number of advocates, partners, and other companies who are promoting best practice policies, best practice corporate approaches to transparency and reporting, and ambitious pledges to reducing emissions. For instance, we joined what Amazon started, the Climate Pledge. We joined it last year to commit Uber to reaching net zero emissions by 2040 across all the scopes that we account for and all the lines of business that we manage. Those are the pieces for what we've done, just a high-level overview of what we've done to start on this journey. Like I mentioned, we just got started about a year ago, so we're just at the beginnings of a very long journey. And like I said, we know that we cannot get there on our own. So we're hoping that many others will join us on this journey. We're hoping to learn from a number of others, not just companies, but government agencies and advocates as well.
Hey, Adam, I'm going to take a moment and double click on that second column there, which is infrastructure, because that's a critical piece to climate as a team sport. And I just want to take a second because, what we're dealing with and what the whole world is dealing with is trying to solve this chicken and egg issue where people are struggling to buy or don't want to buy, make the choice to buy an electric vehicle because there's nowhere to charge them. And companies and jurisdictions don't want to build the infrastructure because no one has the cars. So it's much of the investment in the past has been misallocated to private vehicle ownership and trying to encourage electric charging in suburban areas or places where people have EVs as a second car or third car. But we have to remember when we're thinking about these things that a single commercial vehicle going electric can have a much bigger impact, potentially the equivalent of 5 individually owned cars. So having the focus on commercial use cases, so for example, rideshare, that can make up many more miles per vehicle is a change in terms of the calculus that the governments and cities need to go. So that's one of the things that we work about in our transparency reports. All the reports that we put out talk a little bit about the partnerships that we need, and we're working with BP and a variety of other organizations to try to solve this issue, to make sure there's high speed charging stations in the middle of city centers so that drivers and delivery people who are using electric vehicles are able to charge up quickly and get back to earning, which is an important piece of this solving the climate chicken and egg issue.
Yeah, it's absolutely right, Marian. It's an area that we don't have a lot of deep expertise in, so that's why we've been so fortunate to engage with so many of these leading companies who are big household names that you'll recognize, and others who are new starting up innovators driving new tech into both EV and EV charging and ways for drivers to interact with those offerings. So we're really pleased to be putting together the start of a very large portfolio of partners around the world.
That's great. Thank you both so much for the overview of how Uber is thinking about sustainability in our business strategies. To recap what it was that we heard, we have a public commitment of what our sustainability goals are in the next couple decades. We have key action plans that Adam walked through, and then it's a team sport. So we're working with a variety of partners and continuing to do so to achieve our ambitious goals. With that said, what are best practices to create a strong sustainability strategy? Let's dive into that. Marian, could you tell us more about what sustainability means in business?
Yeah, absolutely. You can see a definition here on the slides, managing the business and its environmental impacts to promote responsible, ethical, and ongoing success. So that's a business that functions in the best interest of the local and global environment, supporting the community and economy we're all dependent on a healthy planet, right? So an environmentally aware business thinks about its ecosystem, and I used that word a little bit earlier, the ecosystem, and considers, of course, profits, and the impact that the company has on the society and the environment. It contributes to the health of the structure in the system where it operates, and construction an environment where not only the one business, but all businesses can thrive. Profits, people, planet, and an acknowledgement that all of this is related. So at Uber, our ecosystem is cities. It's cities of the world, and building shareholder returns and growth now requires leaders, our leaders, to ask themselves, how is our company going to fit into this broader ecosystem where it operates? So gone are the days when companies could assume they don't have a role to play in the larger social or environmental context, both inside their companies, which is cultural, employee engagement, retention, attraction, et cetera. And let's acknowledge, as we did earlier, that climate change and environment has a big part in that, but also outside their companies. And that's what sustainability means in business, is considering the ecosystem for your company and making sure that you're considering it in your business decision making.
Thank you for that definition, Marian. And also want to mention the caveat that this is the way that we define sustainability at Uber. It could vary depending on your industry or your function. So once we've gotten clear on what sustainability means to your business, there are still some challenges that you may come across along the way. Adam, could you tell us more about this?
That's right, Ariana. It certainly can be a challenge for any business, particularly if you've never done anything in the sustainability space or in the green space and you're just getting started, or you think you want to get started. And those can range from a number of issues that may be obvious or not, including lack of resources. It's generally not something that starts with a big funding mandate. Unengaged personnel, it's usually something you have to go around and get buy-in on. The third is not having a clearly defined set of success criteria, and it leads to the last, which is having a clear strategy. Sustainability as a word can sound overwhelming. Are we talking about recycling? Are we talking about managing food waste in the cafeteria? Are we talking about how much electricity we use? Are we talking about making green products for consumers? The answer, of course, is yes, but distilling for you and your organization where to begin is a really important exercise, and it's worth the time, because otherwise you can start to find yourself running in circles and having a challenge getting that buy-in, because you can't get everybody focused on crystallizing the idea that you have in mind, or having getting some resources devoted to getting started. So it's really important to start, and it leads into a couple of insights that Marian and I and other colleagues that we work with have been lucky to have time and space to experience and distill over time. So I'll let Marian share with you a few tips about what we found helpful for getting started.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to do is to frame sustainability at your company. And this just builds on what Adam is saying, is frame sustainability in a way that acknowledges its importance to the success of your business. And that means understanding and communicating all the ways that sustainability might impact your business, and with a special emphasis on climate change, because we know that's an issue that affects all of us. You know, climate change is a big environmental issue. It's a big social issue. It's a big financial issue. And that's what makes it so hard sometimes to wrap your head around, you know, from an internal governance standpoint, because it is so very cross-functional. So you want to sit down and think about how your business makes money and how your business spends money, and the myriad ways that sustainability or climate change might factor into decision making. And that includes the direct physical impact and also the transition impacts. The best practice, and Ari, I don't know if you have a slide here, but is to do a formal materiality assessment. That's slide 23. And you know, you can see here, and we can go back to the other slide in a second, but you can see we did a materiality assessment. We described this in our ESG report, and we identified 9 issues that were of utmost importance to our company and to our stakeholders. And you can see these represented in the report and in the ESG program, which is overseen by our board of directors, which is another great accountability and progress mechanism. So you can go back to the previous slide. Sorry to be bossy. And then when you've thought about all the avenues, the ways that sustainability can impact your business, try to narrow your focus to 1 or 2, or in our case 9. I guess I got a little greedy about all the things we could do good on, and try to pick the ones you're going to have the biggest impact and focus on those. And my inspiring phrase is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Just get started and do your best to identify these things and get started on 1 or 2 and assess how sustainability, or these 1 or 2, 3, 4 issues, can cut costs or increase profits. An important piece of this is engaging anyone who can contribute. That means the board, as I mentioned, the board of directors, see what their impact is on this, see if they have official oversight. And if they don't, that's something that you could look into. You also want to make sure your leadership is engaged and that they understand how they're involved in this. And really anyone at the company, everyone, I could go through lists of all the different functions at your company, but every single person has sustainability touch their role in one way or another. And talking to them, listening to the ways that they see about reducing costs or increasing profits, and then sharing the strategies and the top-down views about how sustainability is important. There's actually an interesting example at a Unilever tea factory in England, and this is just one small example where some employees at the tea factory saved the company 47,000 euros and reduced waste of 9.3 tons of paper just by suggesting the company change the size of paper tea bags. So these are small but cumulative ways that you can identify small ways and big ways to help reduce your company's environmental impact, reduce your company's costs, and increase revenue as we all think about innovative ways to address these issues. Finally, encourage your employees to speak up and share their thoughts about how your business can become more sustainable, because good ideas come from everywhere, inside and out your company. So go into this with an open mind and with your ears open.
Excellent. Thank you, Marian. And there's also another way that we like to think about sustainability at Uber. Adam, you coined this, the 4 M's. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So if Marian shared the sort of like starters kit on here's how to get rolling, which I think is absolutely spot on. You want to aim small, win small, demonstrate success, and go forward. You'd be much better off going deeper on one issue you can win on and going broad and trying to cover everything first. Because you really want to demonstrate both to your own management and to external stakeholders that you're onto something, and with that you can get rolling. But if you zoom out and look at the overall strategy, I think there's 4 big buckets of activity to do, and they're essentially sequential but iterative over time. So the first bucket is measurement. You can't start even down this road of materiality or figuring out where you need to be focused without starting to measure where you're having impact. So this may be a carbon footprint assessment of the business. Where do you see the most emissions coming from in your business operations or from your products? It also includes measuring external stakeholder perception of where your impact are. Remember, the customer owns the brand. And when it comes to sustainability branding and perception, it's not just your paying customers, it's your external stakeholders, including investors, internal stakeholders like employees and management, and your board, other external stakeholders like advocacy groups, environmentalists, etc. So it's really important to have a good sense of knowing where you're having impact today, positive or negative, and that starts with measurement. It's very difficult to understate the importance of doing that exercise, even if you just start with one issue area like climate emissions. There are plenty of others, water, energy efficiency, a number of others, but climate's often a good place to start with, and it's usually where some of your larger stakeholder groups are expecting you to start. Measurement is key to get going. Second is magnifying what works. So once you've got the measurement, you can do the materiality assessment. Materiality, just to state it once more, because Marian covered this. Materiality is weighing the difference between how does doing whatever the thing is that you're evaluating move the business bottom line on one dimension versus moving your stakeholders' perception on the other line. So if it's emissions related, and that's a big mover for your stakeholders, but actually won't change your business bottom line, that falls into a certain category. You really want to be looking up and to the right for those things that can move the business needle most by improving it, and move the needle most with your external perception of your impact with stakeholders.
And Adam, can I just add on to that is
Please.
when we're using the word material too, you should know that the word materiality is used in a sense that's broader than that used for financial statements, and that it can just mean issues that are important to your business. So I think that's an important distinction when you're working through these issues yourself.
Right, exactly. So now that you've got your 1 or 2 or 3 or up to 9 material areas to get focused on, what are the ideas? What's already happening in your organization or on your platforms that people are doing to address those areas? Those may be an operational project. That may be a bottom-up informal employee design program. But start to reach out and figure out what's already going on. And what I mean by magnifying what works is anything that's working on the material issue and people like it, people want it, keep doing more of that. Those are the types of things that you want to be taking an inventory of and monitoring so that you can put resources behind it over time. Again, magnify the thing that's working to address your most material issues. The third bucket of activity is messaging. How do you be transparent about what your carbon footprint is, for instance, or what you're doing about it, not only to the external world and your investors and stakeholders outside, but inside the company, how you're messaging to management, the rest of the employee base and your board about where you are today and where you want to go tomorrow. The last exercise, of course, is management. Over time, this ought to be hardwired into your business decision making as you're considering new products or services to launch. What are the implications to your sustainability goals, to your external messaging about sustainability, to the ways in which you're expected to operate and act as a good steward of environmental resources? So as you build in those governance items into your business, checking on new products, new services that you're considering to put investment behind, you need to build in sustainability, hardwire it into the organization's decision-making abilities. This will include over time, this is a high bar, but will include over time compensation, executive compensation, even middle management compensation in terms of how they're making decisions with regards to sustainability and making an impact both on the business side and of course on the impact side, which goes back to that materiality assessment. Those are the big 4 buckets: measurement, magnification, messaging, and management of your sustainability strategy. This is just a high-level template of how to start going about that sustainability strategy, but happy to answer any questions that folks might have about that.
Great. Thank you very much, Adam. And just quickly flashing on this slide as well, Marian discussed these are our 9 material ESG issues. So just as Adam was just talking about materiality, here's an example of the way that Uber approaches it.
And it's also important to note, Ariana, that this particular list, and Marian might have said it, but this particular list is broader than just environment. This is including a number of social and governance issues. And it's important to know where your environment issues stand. Environment may not be your number 1 thing to focus or spend time on. There may be some other areas like safety, like diversity and inclusion, which are incredibly important issues. And as you think about how you're going to put resourcing behind these issues, materiality is going to be a good guide for where to place the most chips on the board.
Thank you very much for that, Adam. So wrapping up, we've gone over a lot of great information today. Some key takeaways: climate change is an urgent issue. It threatens several species' survival, including our own, with a rise in extreme weather and a plastic epidemic. Focusing on sustainability can result in business benefits such as boosting your bottom line, improving investor relations, meeting consumer demands, increasing efficiency, and so on. When creating a sustainability strategy, we recommend focusing on 1 to 2 key issues that you would have the biggest impact on and engage everyone who can contribute, from board members to C-suite and onwards. And ultimately, it all comes down to the data and measurement. Measure, measure, measure. So now we'll take some time to go into Q&A. Everyone, please enter your questions now. And first, we'll start with, how should companies respond to these new expectations from investors? Marian, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think to answer your question, see previous webinar. This whole thing is how do you go about answering the question of investors who are asking because they want to make sure that you're looking to the future, and they want to make sure that you're taking this seriously, and that you're thinking about direct impacts of climate change, and you're thinking about transitioning to a lower carbon economy. And the first step in all of that is to listen to your investors and try to understand where they're coming from, and then try to respond to their questions with measurement. Give them reporting that's helpful for them to make decisions, help them meet their own goals, and be honest and forthright with them about the kinds of challenges and opportunities that your company has in this space. Climate, to Adam's point, climate is a team sport, and investors are on this team with your company and with ours.
Excellent. Thank you, Marian. Our next question, how do I drive change in my organization? What do you guys think?
I mean, I'd say number one is you got to speak the language of your business. When you're speaking to leadership, the most important thing is to make sure that they understand how these sustainability issues, what does it have to do with their business, especially if you're talking to people who maybe have not considered sustainability as being part of the business. And you got to think about, how does your business make money? What do your expenses look like? And how can managing to these sustainability benefits, managing away from sustainability risks, help your company get to its own goals? One of the things that I always do is look at my company's priorities for the year. What is the business trying to accomplish? What is my organization trying to accomplish? What is my boss trying to accomplish? And then take the strategy for ESG issues or sustainability issues and map each thing that we're trying to do back to the back to the overall priorities for the entire company. Because your sustainability work should be feeding into the overall strategy for your company.
And not much more to add to that from me, Ariana. I think Marian nailed it. I think particularly as it relates to the internal job of how do you make sustainability relevant, how do you identify one or two things to get some resources for to get started, you have to speak you have to walk the walk as it relates to the business, and talk the talk that your executives and management are talking. I think as it relates to your external engagement and delivering the company's ability to speak to sustainability and do things that are credible, that are material, that are actually moving emissions or environmental needle, you will need to have the passion. You will need to have the external connections and relationships with advocacy NGOs, with government officials, with other leaders and renowned voices in the environmental space. And that's where passion starts to matter a lot. That's where your own interest in the topic starts to matter a lot. It's also where your employees who may have expertise in these areas, or if you need to hire employees that have expertise in these areas, that will start to matter. So there is a place for passion. There is a place for those who are bleeding hearts about these issues to exist in the corporate structure. But it's that delicate dance because you have to have one foot in both worlds. Both advocating for the right things on behalf of the environment and human health and people everywhere, but also finding ways to move forward that are congruent with what the business needs. And what the business needs is changing all the time. And that's something to be mindful of on even a quarter-to-quarter basis so that you're able to adapt and put things in front of management that make a lot of sense to be moving forward.
Yep. Thank you for that, Adam. So yes, things do change quickly. On a related note about speaking to our external stakeholders, how is Uber going to transition millions of drivers to electric vehicles by 2030?
Very carefully. I think so. There's a few things here that we are doing, but the first most important comment I want to make about this is that drivers are already asking this. We did a survey of drivers in the U.S., Canada, and Europe recently, and more than half of drivers said that they're interested in their next car being an EV. Many don't know if that's what the timing looks like for them. They're all weighing economic factors first and foremost. Drivers who participate on our platform, who use our app to provide trips and services, are looking to make money. And if an EV can make them more money than the vehicle that they're in today or the other gas-powered car they might consider tomorrow, they're happy to shift to that EV. And so it's a delicate balance trying to find how can we help drivers overcome the economic barriers to getting to EVs. And there's a number that exists because EVs generally cost more than most gasoline cars today. And they can mean that drivers earn less when they're on our platform because an EV will require more downtime to look for charging, to commute to charging, and to do the actual plug-in time versus, say, a Prius, which can get 600 miles replenished at any gas station, any corner gas station that you can easily pull up to and refill in 5 minutes. So what are we doing? We're doing 4 things. We're doing education. We're providing new incentives for drivers to earn more. We're providing savings mechanisms so drivers can save for that future EV. And we're providing savings on EVs and EV infrastructure through our partnership. So let me just go through each of those 4 buckets really quickly. So on education, it's difficult to understate the need to reach out to the drivers who engage with our platform on a regular basis to let them know, what are EVs? Where can you find them? How are they different than gasoline cars? How are they different than hybrids, which may have first popped into your mind when you heard the word EV? Most consumers, when asked, have you ever heard of an EV? They'll often say, I'm pretty sure a Prius is an EV. So it's really important to start the educational conversation simply and to meet drivers where they're at in terms of that journey of understanding what EVs are. We partner with a number of organizations to work on this, advocacy groups. I'm on the board of a group called BELOS, which is one of the largest public-private advocates for consumer education on EVs in the United States. We have also worked with a group called Zappy Ride to make a tool available to drivers on our website where you can go and figure out, if I'm in a Camry today, how much would it cost me to get into an EV tomorrow? And what would those expenses look like, depending if I can charge it at home or charge it in the public? We provided a tool that gives lots of information to drivers based on where they live, down to the zip code. So education is pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 are incentives, more ways to make money that we, Uber, pay drivers or offer to drivers in order to incent them to move to EVs. So right now, we offer $1 more per trip in a battery EV anywhere in the US and Canada. Every time you do a trip in a battery EV, regardless of the product, you make more in a battery EV. We also have products like Uber Green, which can earn drivers more by offering trips on those products. Their eligibility changes by country. In some cases, hybrids are included. In others, it's EV only. But we've reduced our service fee or have added additional incentives to providing Uber Green trips. So more ways for drivers to earn money. That's pillar number 2. Pillar number 3 are ways that drivers can save money in the car that they have today for that future EV. So we have a really cool program in London and in France by which we put a very small fee on all trips that riders pay. In London, it's 3 pence per mile, and drivers then accrue savings towards that future EV at the same rate. So every trip that a driver completes, they have a little incentive pool that it's being added to, and after it grows to a few £1,000s, they can cash that in. We write a check, and it goes towards their future EV purchase that they'll be making in the next 1 or 2 years. To date, we've accrued more than £140 million as part of our Clean Air Plan in London to help drivers save for EVs and make the shift over the next couple of years. The last pillar that I mentioned are ways in which we're working with our partners to help drivers save on EVs and EV charging. So the slide that we flashed earlier with all those partners like BP on the charging side, or EVgo, which is one of the largest fast charging networks in the United States. We have organized and made cut deals with those partners for best terms for drivers to access EV charging at the lowest rates, exclusive to drivers who use our app, or go and buy or finance or lease or rent an EV through our many partners with automakers, leasing, and rental companies so that they can get the best terms in terms of accessing an EV or EV charging. So those 4 pillars, once again, education, incentives from Uber, savings in the car that you have today towards your future EV, and finally, 4th, savings on EVs and EV charging infrastructure through our partners.
And just to add one footnote on there about, as much as I'd like to have extraordinary confidence in users, so riders and drivers alike, or whoever your stakeholders are, to be willing to wait a little bit longer or pay a bit more for a green option, at some point, Uber Green will have to be the cheaper option, a faster option, better for your quality of life, better for the environment. And ultimately, that's where we have to go. We don't want sustainability at Uber or anywhere to be more expensive, more complicated, and more time consuming. It should be a no-brainer. And that's where we're going. But so right now we're working. That's what we're doing, is trying to bridge the economics of this as part of a bigger team that includes, frankly, it includes you, it includes experts, it includes automakers, governments, investors, customers, all these folks. And if we work together, we'll get there. We'll get there together.
And I'm pleased to say we're already, we're soon to be there in a number of markets. In fact, Uber Green is a cheaper choice than Uber X in places like France, where we've been able to really move fast given the support of government policies in those markets that allow drivers to make the shift to EVs even sooner than other markets around the world.
Excellent. Well, I can't think of a better note to end it on. Everyone, thank you so much for attending. This was an excellent session, lots of information, lots of things to think about. We will be sending out this recording on demand, so you can come back and revisit a lot of these great nuggets and expertise from Adam and Marian. Both of you, thank you so much for your time today, and we will see you again in our future webinars.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ariana. Thank you.